Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Cabinet on Monday, the 6th of September. Thank you all for coming. We will start with apologies for absence. I do not believe there are any. Minutes. To approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of July. I hope you have good memories. Councillor Shires.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to note that my non-pecuniary interest, so that's page 2. I've been working with North Walsham Football Club regarding mental health, not regarding the matter that we were discussing.
Thank you very much. We got a note of that. Thank you. Anybody else? Anything from the minutes? In which case, can I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Councillor Fredericks, Councillor Kershaw. All those in favour, please. Thank you very much. It's unanimous. Yeah, Councillor Toy wasn't there. That's why it's not voting. Right. I'm not aware that we have any, but do we have any public questions or statements? Thank you very much. Do we have any items of urgent business? Do we have any declarations of interest? No? Thank you very much. We have, oh yes. Yes, that's absolutely fine. Sorry, could we, the meeting that was held on the 19th of July, minutes. Can we go back to that? Councillor Seward. And Councillor Toy second. Can I have a show of hands, please? Accept those as a true record of the meeting. Thank you. Apologies for missing, there were 2 sets of minutes there. Right. Members' questions we'll take as we go along, unless anyone's got anything they want to raise at this point. In which case we go to recommendations from Cabinet working parties, and we go to Councillor Toy for the local plan policy.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. Morning, everybody. Yeah, the first item, the haze were removed from the small growth villages. I've had some recent information that that may have changed because the shop's not disappearing. Therefore, I'd just like to refer that back to the working party just to see where that stands now within the plan before we submit that, because that is coming forward very soon. And the other items are to ensure that as we identify sites, that there's more emphasis on affordable housing. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chairman. Thank you. In respect of our meeting of the 14th of July, there were no recommendations to bring you to Cabinet today. However, I would like just to take the opportunity, if I may, on the minutes of the 5th of July, which you've just reviewed. On page 2, there was a recommendation there regarding the consideration given to the resourcing of the planning enforcement team to strengthen and support the council's planning enforcement process. At that particular time, you said that Cabinet were already giving consideration to this and a response would be provided in due course. I wonder if you've reached a conclusion yet.
Thank you, Councillor. Now that we have our new director in place in that post, we'll be finalising that. So yes, it has taken longer than we would have liked, but we will be discussing it with him. And if it's considered appropriate, we will continue with it. Thank you. Anything else? No? Okay. The officer delegated decision list, you've all had a chance to review it. This isn't here for us to actually vote on. This is up here for us to note. I don't know if the chief executive has anything he would like to say on this report.
Not unless any members have any questions, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. No? Okay, lovely. Thank you very much, everyone. In which case we move to Councillor Seward, please, and the budget monitoring report, period 4.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is the first monitoring report for the current financial year from April until July. These are early days, as I think probably we've either observed or expected. In terms of both car parking income and planning income, we are now above the budget forecast, but certainly in relation to car park income, it will be the next monitoring report when we will have a clearer picture about what car parking income has been like during the season. So it's on that basis that I ask Cabinet to note the contents of the report. This report goes through review and scrutiny, and clearly there's the opportunity then for members to ask further questions.
Thank you, Councillor Seward. Do we have a seconder for this report? Councillor Kershaw, thank you. Did anyone want to make any comments on this report? Councillor Shires.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask on page 31 under quality of life. I'm pretty sure that the Splash Leisure Centre re-provision should now read reef. And I think that would be helpful for members to be able to distinguish what's splash and what's reef.
Thank you. Anybody else got anything they'd like to raise? No? In which case, it having been duly proposed, we will move to the vote. All those in favour of receiving this report? Thank you very much. Unanimous. Item 11 on our agenda, the 2020-21 outturn report, period 12 budget monitoring report. Councillor Seward.
Thank you again, Madam Chairman. Right, this is the outturn report for the last financial year. I always like these reports because it shows what has actually happened rather than speculation and forecasting. The bottom line is it's good news because we actually ended after what can only be described as an extraordinary year with a surplus of just over £750,000. What I think this shows is that the council's finances are soundly managed and that we come out of the COVID pandemic so far in a good financial position. We've not had to take money out of our reserves in order to balance the books, and we can continue with the council's priorities. I am grateful to the finance team for the work that's been done to ensure that our finances remain in good stead, and I'd also like to thank Sean Knight's Revenue and Benefits team, who were also a crucial factor in this. Just sort of, in essence, working through what has happened here. In terms of the operating costs against budget, we ended up with an adverse balance of just over £1 million, but this was more than made up by not having to borrow money, which we were expecting to do for both the waste vehicles in the new Serco contract and also for the Reef Leisure Centre, because the amount of cash that was coming into the council and churning through meant that we were actually able to pay for things without actually having to borrow money. The other thing was that we've done much better than we were expecting in terms of the business grants collection fund. This is helped because we have many small businesses in North Norfolk. They've got 100% rate relief, and therefore income was coming straight to the council. We also benefited from fees and charges compensation scheme for the loss of income on the car parks and to a lesser extent the leisure centre. So that means that we have ended up with money going to the delivery plan reserve, which will enable us as a council to continue to invest in North Norfolk. Now, like this council, like many others, received government assistance from central government in order to get through the COVID pandemic. But I think it's worth pointing out that this council, unlike a good many others of varying political persuasions, are still in a dire financial situation, even though they have received government support. This council is not. When I look at what has actually happened, to go back to what we were predicting or forecasting. When I presented a budget in February 2019, for the year 2021, which at that time we hadn't looked at in detail, it was just a forecast, we were projecting a deficit of £2 million. We were also, interested enough, projecting a deficit of for the current year of £2 million also. Actually, we've ended up with a surplus of £750,000. Now, I just think I point this out because this does show the whole challenges that we are faced with budget forecasting. And I suppose in looking forward that the biggest challenge that we face is uncertainty over the level of future central government support and uncertainty over when this is going to be introduced. Now, I have flagged this up in the 3 budgets that I presented so far, and I wouldn't be surprised if I have to flag it up again in February next year. All I can say is that if we didn't have this uncertainty, if the level of central government support was staying as it currently is, I could say with a great deal more confidence that we would be able to maintain our current level of services, keep down council tax and increases in charges, because the current level of government support with our soundly managed finances enables us to do that. So it really is against this background that I think the council's got to continue to ensure that we provide value for money in our services and our finances remain sound. And it is for this reason that the zero budgeting exercise to ensure that what we are doing matches our statutory duties and corporate priorities is currently taking place. So that, Madam Chairman, is the context in which I introduced this report, and therefore I move the recommendations that are set out on page 33.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Do we have a seconder for this report? Thank you, Councillor Shires. Do we have anyone wishing to ask questions on this report? Councillor Cushing, you were first.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I wonder if Councillor Seward could confirm actually how much money the government gave to the council by way of compensation during the last financial year.
I do have a figure somewhere, but I've got Lucy Hume here. Lucy, I don't have it on the top of my head, but can you just remind us what it was?
Yeah, so we had 2 different types of central government support that came directly to the council rather than local businesses. So the first one was a non-ring fenced COVID related grant that came in 4 different tranches. And as a total figure, we received 1.7 million from that. In terms of the sales fees and charges compensation scheme, which was put in place to help compensate us for losses of income, we received about £700,000 from that. The final reconciliation process is underway, so that figure may change once that's been done, because it was done sort of quarterly on estimates. So MHCLG are currently working with us to confirm the actual amounts, so we can confirm that figure.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Cushing?
Yes, so if my maths is correct, that's I think what 2.4 million. So I just wonder, it's just surprising when Councillor C would express thanks to a lot of people. I think one of the people, organisations you might want to express some thanks to as a government for giving that support, which I believe is, as he actually correctly mentioned, has been replicated up and down the length and the breadth of the country. If I may have another question, please, on a different subject. You mentioned that when you're looking at the forecast a couple of years ago, you were projecting a deficit of £2 million. Is any work being done to analyse what fed into that projection of the deficit? And we've now ended up with a surplus. So can any work be done in order to understand really how you could improve the projections for the future? I take your point about uncertainties about government subsidies, various things, but is there anything that can be done there to actually improve the forecasting going forward, do you think?
Well, one of the difficulties when the finance team do the projections going forward in terms of central government support, they do it on the basis that there will be changes in the level of support that we receive, and therefore it won't be at the level that we've received in the past. So there's the Rural Services Delivery Grant that gets taken out. Now, that is, if you like, cautious and sound financial forecasting going forward. The difficulty is it's not actually replicating what is actually happening at the moment, which is why I touched on it when I referred to it. But I don't know if Lucy Who has got anything further you'd like to add.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is very difficult looking at the current time, even just 1 year into the future, never mind the kind of 3 or 4 that we try to cover as part of the medium-term financial strategy. I think, so Eric's sort of spoken about the difficulties around that uncertainty from future funding streams. And I think that's really key. And the fact is that there's uncertainty around all of these different streams. So not only do we have the potential impact of the fair funding review, that we still have had no definite date for implementation. We still have no definite idea of how much money we stand to gain or lose from that particular arrangement. We have issues with the business rates retention scheme. So we have no idea come April whether the business rates retention scheme will be in existence in its current format or whether that will be changing. One of the things that we know as a minimum will be brought in are these more regular business rates revaluations, which really help local businesses, because it means that the rates they're paying is more reflective of the value of the business. But that's obviously creating challenges for us, because it then means we can't forecast into the future with the same level of certainty that we can now about what rates we're actually going to be bringing in. So that's the second major problem. The other kind of non-ring fence grants that we have in, so thinking about Rural Services Delivery Grant, RSG, New Homes Bonus, lots of these things, again, uncertain as to whether they're continuing from April. So the idea is that the fair funding review should replace some of those, but in the absence of that, it's not particularly clear whether some of those will continue in their entirety or whether they'll be pared back in some way. The government have been wanting to use the pot that's set aside for the New Homes Bonus to fund social care. So each year we find that the New Homes Bonus pot is being top sliced, but we don't have any information in advance of sort of December time about how much that's going to be. And it's a ministerial decision, so they can pick a figure that they want, basically. Last year we did have help from the lower tier services grant, which was a new grant that came completely out of the blue, which is £130,000, which really helped us. But again, we had no advance warning of that at all, and it just kind of appeared. And those things that we obviously can't predict with any great certainty. And with trying to be prudent in our estimates, I would rather be kind of cautious in our estimates of what grants are continuing and what grants are stopping, because I think it would rather be projecting a potential deficit and then find that we don't quite get there, than being overly optimistic about the grants that we think are continuing, and then we end up with a problem when we find that we're not getting them. So it is really difficult. We do work with several different funding advisory services to help us with our future forecasts as well. And they talk to MHCLG a lot, the civil servants and the ministers, to try and find out what's going on, to help give us a bit of a heads up with that. And we're also part of several different local kind of peer groups where we sort of compare assumptions when we're doing our forecasting to make sure that we're all kind of being reasonable in our approaches, and as much as possible sort of discussing amongst ourselves what we think the most likely outcome is. So it's not an exact science, but we're always looking to improve the way we do our forecasting and make sure that we have factored in everything that we can reasonably expect to.
Thank you very much. I think it's worth saying that when I was sitting in the seat that you're sitting in, it was a question I used to ask quite regularly. Coming from a commercial background, it's difficult to sometimes understand all the different vagaries of the government's grants and how they impact on us in this environment. And it is frustrating at times. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Councillor Rest.
Thank you, Madam. Can I just clarify on page 35, 1.6 with Councillor Stewart, the 752,000 I understand is written down as a surplus. Is this going to be put in a special reserve, or does it just go into the general pot for use of?
It's going into the delivery plan reserve at the moment. But I think it's, you've probably listened to me over the years. I don't like carrying excessive reserves, and it's going in the delivery plan reserve. But the intention is to then earmark it for future investment in Norfolk. In other words, going back to our communities.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Shires.
Sorry, Madam Chairman, it's me again. I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to page 81, under the line communities. Now, I understand that Norfolk County Council used to give the District Council a proportion of the Second Homes Council tax, but that was withdrawn. I can't remember whether or not it was withdrawn within my time here, so it's only, 2.5 years. And I believe that should be reflected better in that line.
Can I ask the officer, can we get that changed, updated? Thank you very much indeed. Did anybody else have any questions or comments that they'd like to make? Councillor Toy.
Just at risk of being accused of things, but actually I'd just like to say, that Councillor Seward and the officers, their prudent work with this very changing, very unpredictable environment is great work that keeps us in this place that we know other councils are struggling to match what we're doing. So I just think it's great work that they've done, and I thank them for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Toy. I think we'd all like to add our thanks to that. In which case, this report having been duly proposed and seconded, and there being no more questions, can I ask for a show of hands, please, to accept? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Right, so moving on to item 12 on the agenda, the Treasury Management Annual Report. Can I first of all just draw people's attentions to the recommendations where it says 2019-20. That obviously is not correct and needs amending, please. Thank you. So, having said that, please could I pass over to Councillor Seward.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think I just asked the Council to resolve that the Treasury Management Annual Report and Prudential Indicators for 2021 are approved. This report does go through to the Scrutiny Committee, so there's certainly the opportunity there to members to ask questions. But if clearly there's questions today, I will, between myself and the officer, will do our best to answer them.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions, please? Do we have a seconder, please? Thank you, John. So Councillor Toy has seconded. If there are no questions, then I would ask for a show of hands, please, to support this. Thank you all very much. That's unanimous. Can I move us then, please, to item 13, the debt recovery 2021, and hand those over to Councillor Seward.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. This report reflects the sound and detailed work that's done by Sean Knight and his revenue and benefits team. Clearly, in the last 12 months, that was the period of 2021 that we were covering here, was a challenging period for rate collection. And indeed, this council, like many others at the start of the pandemic, had a much more softer approach to arrears, given the difficult situation that both households and businesses were placed in. Our performance rates are high, but they're not, they are just slightly below target, 0.3%, 0.03% in the case of council tax collections, and in the case of business rate collections, we were 0.07% down. That reflects the circumstances. There is a drive on now to collect these arrears in. Progress is being made. So I simply move the recommendations as set out in the agenda item 13.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on this report? Comments? No, do we have a seconder for this report, please? Councillor Fredericks. In which case, the report having been duly proposed and seconded, can I ask for a show of hands, please? Thank you all very much. It's unanimous. Can I move to item 14, please, on the agenda, the customer services strategy, and to Councillor Shires? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This has been through pre-scrutiny with overviewing scrutiny, so I'm very pleased about that. But I believe that some of the changes that I and Cabinet have asked for are not reflected in this document. I'm very frustrated, but I do feel that we are almost there with this strategy, so I would ask that we defer it until our next meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that deferral? Thank you, Councillor Kane. Do we have any comments on that?
Sorry, we have an indication of when it might be.
It will be back to October.
Sorry?
It will be back to October. Or the next meeting. Okay. So we'll move on then, please, to, do we need to take a vote on that deferral? Please, can we take a vote on that deferral? So all those in favour of a deferment? Thank you. I think it's very frustrating. But we have to do. Absolutely, it has to be right. Right, item 16, managing performance. I think that we can say the council is now making good progress against our targets. We are moving in the right direction. We have been stalled for a little while, as we all know, but things are moving well. And apart from the one deferment we've just had, the strategy has been written. We are now going forwards. Good progress has been made on other items within the report. I'm sure it's quite a lengthy report and you will have all studied it. The thing I would ask you all to remember is this is a question of where we were at the end of Q1. It is not the current day position. That is the way these reports are written and presented to us. So if anyone has any questions, we're very happy to take them. But I would be happy to propose this report. Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Outside of the report, where it's been made. I'm aware that 60 one of the question one of the is It's just striking that the meaning of this report having access. Have been most of the bank services have been focused on those are set on the base and there are no base on the base for any exception. And another thing it came after one of the presentations that also announced about that whole bit. So I thought that meant, I think we might make straws from the table. So I thought for a couple of reports, where was that actually mentioned? I got but one time on the side, action CS 003, average wait time is average time sustained. I think they can't sustain how long. So overall, I don't think we should. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I think we do need to remember that we have had to deal with a major pandemic. Our businesses have been amongst the best supported by this council. We have got another report coming to us just after this one, which if we had not supported our businesses well enough, we would not have received the extra money. Only 2 councils, I believe, in East Anglia have actually received the extra funds from government because of the quality of the support that they are getting. So I think the report and the way it is written does not reflect every aspect of every piece of work that this council does. And I think we are doing an exceptional job. I think the call handling, I think we would all agree, was extremely disappointing. We are working on that, and that is why the customer services strategy this morning, the times and the pieces of information that are in that, we were not prepared to accept. We have said they need to be updated to take into consideration the views of members that were passed at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And that will be done to make sure that we have the strongest possible mechanism for working with our customers going forward. It is one of our priorities and it is taking too long, but we will continue to drive forward on that. And it has been delayed by COVID. I'm tired of hearing COVID as an excuse as well, but COVID is not an excuse, it is an explanation. And I think we need to understand that.
Well, fine, and I'm pleased to hear that you, I'd be interested to actually hear actually what specific actions will be in order to improve those call handling response times. I mean, not only is it the call handling, the fact the number of calls we've dropped, it's actually the targets, actually the time it takes for people to answer the phone. And I have an own personal experience. My father tried to call the council some weeks ago and said, he said I waited ages actually before I got through to anyone. And I don't know what the call was about specifically, but anyway, that's personal experience. On the other hand, the other point I mentioned, which you haven't referred to, is around the movement of the due dates. Most reports I've seen in my experience actually have a baseline date. So would it not be an idea to put the baseline target dates into the report, and then you've got the due dates? If you actually see any movements in that, that's explicit to not only you, and I thought your cabinet would be interested to see that, let alone those of us, other councillors as well.
I think Cabinet understand where we have had to change dates on things because of the pandemic. And that's a reality. We had a lot of officers and a lot of officer time that would otherwise have been directed to moving this objective forward at a different time. I'm very happy for us to take away and look at the dates, but you may find that you won't like what happens when we have dates in that report as well, because times do have to change when this authority, we are not a large authority, and our priority has to be responding to the needs of our residents. And then the rest of what we do comes along. So I think we need to be very, very careful about moving things without being, what's the word I want? We need to be focused on what we need to deliver. And if that means we have to move it back a bit because we've had 18 months out due to COVID, then that's what we will do. But we intend to deliver for these residents, as we have always said we will do. And I think we're doing that.
The point I'm making, Madam Chairman, is about open and honest reporting. Obviously, it is our duty as councillors to scrutinise these reports. And that one, I mean, I have read all of it. It takes a lot of us time and effort, but I always believe a good MI report, information should leap out from the page to you between the eyes. And if you are moving target dates back and that is not made clear, then that doesn't help us at all. And obviously that gives rise to questions to why they're being moved back. So that's the point I'm making there.
Yeah, and the point I'm making, the reason they've been moved back is because the officers have had to do other work, which we did not anticipate when we started. Chief Executive would like to comment. Thank you.
In terms of process and transparency, obviously the council approved a corporate plan in October, November 2019, followed by a delivery plan of February 2020. That laid out this administration's ambitions and had, I think, about 90 deliverable outcomes or objectives. Clearly, with the onset of the pandemic in March 2020 and the sustained intervention that officers delivered under your direction and reporting to you regularly during the summer of 2020, I advised the Cabinet in August of last year that it was not a sustainable position to maintain or deliver across all 90 of those objectives at that time. And a report was presented to Cabinet in October 2020, which slimmed down those to 18 priority objectives. And I believe that the changes that you've highlighted reflect the decision that was taken open and transparently in October 2020 when a refined delivery plan was agreed. I think that is appropriate. It reflected the pressure and the need to respond to both community, public protection and working with our businesses during the summer of 2020. And clearly the position around the pandemic continued into the first quarter of this year with a third national lockdown and then the roadmap to recovery and the lifting of restrictions, which itself was amended nationally from June through to the 19th of July. So that has required a reactive response to a changing national and international picture. I am conscious of the issues that Councillor Cushing has raised. I'm working with the Leader of the Council and the Cabinet to bring back a further report to Cabinet next month, which reviews in full the 18 priority objectives which were agreed in the report of October last year, and so that there is a further opportunity for the Cabinet to restate or refocus the objectives moving forward, because good progress has been made against many of those 18 objectives. I think 4 of those have not been delivered in entirety. I think a number of the original objectives stated develop and implement, and arguably we've developed but we haven't implemented some of those issues around the communication strategy, the housing strategy, so those pieces of work arguably never completed in full. But I'm sensitive to the comments which Councillor Cushing has made, and we can look at where that those dates have been pushed forward, if that would be helpful, and we can directly attribute them to the prioritisation that was done last October, if that would be helpful moving forward. But there will be another opportunity for Cabinet and scrutiny to understand the journey or the decisions that were made to prioritise or push back some of those objectives based on what is truly exceptional. And that isn't an excuse. it is a reality in terms of the programme of this authority. For an organisation with 300 staff, you couldn't deliver your corporate plan and respond to COVID, which has obviously endured now for 18 months. And, you know, I know that the issues are very complex around management of COVID, but thankfully, through strong partnership working, I believe that we do have a record in COVID that is to be quite proud of. We are in amongst some of the very lowest levels of infection nationally, and that position has been maintained throughout the last 18 months.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak? Oh, sorry, Helen, I missed your Officer Thomas. Would you like to come in? Sorry, I missed your hand on the screen.
Yes, it's a technical point. I'm afraid I couldn't hear Councillor Cushing's remarks, but if I could come in on a technical point in terms of the process, it's been made clear to lead officers for the delivery plan actions. If there is a need to change the due date, they have to explicitly mention that in the comment to say what the due date was, what it is now, and the reason for its change. If there have been any places where that has not happened, that should not have happened, because it's been made clear to lead officers they have to be overt if they're changing that due date for any reason.
Thank you. Did anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Halliday.
I think we touched on this last time. Sometimes we have green when it should be amber, and we haven't made the progress. And that, I think, speaks to the transparency issue, because if someone looking at this quickly would think that everything in the garden was rosy, but in fact, possibly some of these have been overgraded. I just take the example of 2.6.2 under business, which is nurture the concept of inclusive growth, and whatever you think of that as an actual performance metric. Nothing has happened, and to call that green, and this is just one of a few, I think is unnecessary. And also, could I also say, in the performance under the KPIs, it's quite difficult to assess performance if you haven't got a target, and quite a few of them don't have targets, and so it's a little bit difficult to see how we can be quite so reassured. Again, if you're flicking through quickly, you might not understand that you weren't quite sure what you were working against.
Okay. We will take those points on board. I think those of us that are working with them on a day-to-day basis are very, very aware of the targets that we're working on and what we are trying to deliver and are delivering. Thank you. Right, this report having duly been proposed, do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Shires, thank you. Can we move to the vote then, please? All those in favour? Thank you. Moving to item 17 on the agenda, the ratification, sorry, I've jumped one here. Yes, it's item 16. Sorry, I jumped over 2 pages there. So the additional restrictions grant. Councillor Kershaw, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This paper has been prepared by our officers, and I think it shows an intelligent way to look forward, moving from rescue, as we have been in the last 18 months, to recovery. As the Chair's pointed out, it's only possible because the officers managed to defray all the grants that we had previously, and as one of 2 councils in this area, we were able to secure £760,000 for this fund. I think it's also it's an excellent paper. It focuses on helping the visitor tourism sector, which employs 25% of our workforce, and also much needed help for training in the care sector and training of care workers. And the other remainder part of the fund will be used as a hardship fund. This is discretionary. We are still working within the limits of government guidance. So obviously, if there's a sector that is regarded as non-essential, we have to be careful because this is all subject to audit. But I think it's a sound paper and I commend it, and I would like to see it go through. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have a second for this paper, please? Councillor Lloyd, thank you. Does anyone have any questions on this paper? Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brief for Councillor Kershaw. On page 246, it mentions that one of the purposes of the fund is to support businesses which have slipped between the cracks. Looking at the panel which will pay out the grants, will reference be made to that in terms of identifying businesses, in terms of the grants that will be allocated to those businesses? What I'm thinking about in terms of, obviously there'll be businesses across Norfolk, and there are many of them who have already received government grants. But there'll be obviously some who haven't. Would preference on that basis be given to those that haven't? How would the allocation and decision-making process actually work?
Sorry, Councillor Cushing, could you put your microphone on so that you can all hear?
Thank you, Councillor Cushing. Yes, we will look at businesses. That's why the hardship fund has been set up. We don't want to penalise people that are specifically maybe in a non-essential sector if they have a very specific reason or they've been let down. The problem we will have with this fund is there is not enough money to help all the businesses that have fallen through the cracks. But we will be very sympathetic, and we do evaluate applications specifically on merits, and that is passed by the committee, the sounding committee. So it's not exclusive, it's trying to be as inclusive as the funds allow.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I believe Councillor Holliday, you had a question.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify the amount going to the care sector, which seems to be equally direly provided for as the hospitality. It seems to be rather less well endowed under this particular project. So I wonder if you could clarify. It says 10,000. Is that the total sum that's going to go towards it? And also the other point I would make is you're very usefully wanting to employ the unemployed, but they won't always have cars. And there's one area you can't work in if you don't have a car. It's the domestic and also the residential care sector.
Thank you, Councillor Holliday. The scheme, I will get, I think, Officer Quick is on the call. I think it's £500,000 that is split between the visitor sector and the care sector. The initial grants are limited, but if I would ask for clarity from Stuart Quick if he's able to give clarity. Thank you.
Yeah, very happy to, Councillor Kershaw. So the priorities then, are to quickly highlight this then, is that initially we'd ring fence about £500,000 for a business recovery and resilience grant scheme. That, as Councillor Kershaw has highlighted, is quite an inclusive scheme. So it's designed to not only support businesses that have recognised new opportunities, but also support those who are continuing to receive some degree of hardship. As an example, because of things like the retail travel sector is a good example, because they've still suffering with international travel bookings. The other areas then are about digitalisation, the visitor economy and the care sector. And in terms of the care sector, I mean, at this point in we're just obviously looking to review all options, but we are currently talking to a provider in that area, of which we are still waiting for a fee proposal. So we do not have a firm amount on that, but we will be reviewing that in the next steps over the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions, please? In which case, that having been duly proposed and seconded, can we move to the vote, please? All those in favour? Thank you. Right. Now we can move to item number 17 on the agenda, the ratification of the Norfolk Strategic Flooding Alliance strategy. I move to Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to propose this and sign up to the principles within this document, recognising the need for partnership working across Norfolk to support flooding events and prevention. I'm not overly impressed with the progress made so far. I'm actually, I think that this has only been running several months, and I think we should give it time to deliver. There's only 3 delivery action points listed as complete at the rear of the document, and I think we should do better than that. But I think the only way we're going to solve these issues is to work collaboratively with bodies across the whole of Norfolk. So I'm happy to continue with this as we stand.
Thank you. I think you make a good point. This is about working across the whole of Norfolk for the good of all our residents. I've got Councillor Fitch-Tillett and then I've got Councillor Holliday.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's with some relief I find that the Strategic Flood Alliance has been formed. Members may recall I was an Environment Agency appointee to the Regional Flood and Coastal Committee, and the outgoing chairman commented, I think just before Christmas last year, that his huge disappointment that Norfolk County Council, as the lead local flood authority, had done away with their flood forum. Now, I think all of us can quote experiences of flooding in the last 2 or 3 years. Obviously, inland flooding, I know we've had issues in North Walsham, I know we've had issues in Sheringham, and obviously flooding along the coast. I'm very pleased to say that the head of Coastal Partnership East, Karen Thomas, is part of the Strategic Flood Alliance, so the coast hasn't been forgotten. It very nearly was, but thankfully it's now at the table as well. I am very happy to second this. I wish them well, and I do hope that our lead local flood authority actually does an awful lot more work in regard of flood prevention. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Yes, I think we all know that the prevention is a large part of what we need to be focusing on. Absolutely. Councillor Holliday.
I echo Councillor Fitch-Tillett's comments, but I'm just slightly concerned there's very little mention of coastal flooding in this. If you look at it, first point, it's being led by the inland flooding group, and actually the flyer they put out, which is the one action that they've done, didn't mention coastal flooding at all. It's all about heavy rain, and it doesn't mention flood warnings as the first people to who you should turn if you live in a coastal village. So I think we need just to represent ourselves a little bit stronger. This is much more dealing with the inland problems, and I don't feel that our voice is being sufficiently heard. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have already got a very strong coastal network, and that's why they've started to focus, that the start of their work has been on the inland. But moving forwards, I think you're right, it has to be the whole. This is, you know, if they want to represent all the residents of North Norfolk, they need to make sure they're doing that, and we will keep pushing that. Councillor Dixon was next, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Kershaw. Sorry, I was trying to remember whether it was Councillor Rest or Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I just want to pick up on a few points, really. I endorse what Councillor Fitch-Tillett has said in respect to this and the coastal flooding. I think one needs to recognise that the real thrust that brought this to a the formation of this particular alliance was undoubtedly the fluvial and pluvial flooding incidents, not the coastal. That does not in any way diminish the risks or the priority or the emphasis of coastal. I think one does need to recognise that coastal has been a very prominent consideration in most people's minds for generations, and it is only in the last decade or two that we've seen significant fluvial and pluvial flooding incidents, and the trend of which is very much to be far more regular and far more extensive in the impact. I certainly welcome this, and I have my own concerns with regard to resources that will need to be devoted to delivering all of this. And I'm also cautious about the kind of willingness that everybody is to join up with partnership working and to sign up to a common agenda. But actually the real work is done in integrating that into our various lower levels of working within our organizations. And within this organization, I look towards planning and environmental as being the key deliverers of our engagement within this strategy. And I therefore will be looking for evidence of how we are going to deliver that in our planning policies, in the planning decisions that we make, and with regard to our environmental policies, and again, how we deliver those. So I think we've all got a little bit of, I think, of reservation about where this is all going and how well it will perform. All I can say is that from my involvement, and I've had some considerable involvement now in flooding matters, pluvial and pluvial, one suffers greatly from the way in which responsibilities are divvied up. Right the way from the Environment Agency to the individual landowners, and their lack of knowledge of the rights and responsibilities they have as landowners to maintain drainage systems and so on and so forth. And really, all of this is pretty basic stuff. It really is not rocket science. And unfortunately, what it is a reflection of decades, no, I'll say even longer than that, of neglect and of misunderstanding, and probably of climate variations that have, we were used to in the 70s and 80s of, lots of very dry summers, and we're still having dry summers, but we're also having very wet ones and wet winters and autumns and springs. And it's those are the kind of changes that are bringing about these kind of problems. So for the purposes of my contribution today, Madam Chairman, it is really about how we as an organisation embrace this and demonstrate our engagement and delivery on particularly those two departmental responsibilities, planning and environmental. So I think I've probably said enough, Madam Chairman, but I certainly support this.
Thank you. I think we're all concerned, about how it's going to be delivered and how we're going to move it forward as an objective as the whole of Norfolk. But yes, embedding the principles that are discussed is key at a local level to be able to drive this forward. Councillor Withington, I think you wish to speak.
Thank you. I apologise, my voice has still not got better. I'd like to support this. I do feel, however, there are a number of issues. Most of you are aware that we've had significant pluvial flooding in Sheringham, and I'm pleased to say, and it perhaps reassure Councillor Dixon, that the planning team have been really responsive and have come out to meetings, and I think that reflects a change. We managed to have a meeting with Anglian Water, Lead Flood Authority, all the different organisations on site, and I think this has changed that emphasis for people to understand that that collaborative approach needs to happen. So I'm really pleased that that seems to be coming forward, and I hope, and I'm sure as an authority we will be encouraging that. What my concern is, we can have all this and we can be saying this is what needs to be done, but actually what happens when you have actions that need doing? Who's going to fund it? Where's the collaboration then? It seems to be that's the stage that's disappearing, and I think this could be a fantastic system for bringing forward things, but I don't think we've got the right things in place to actually complete the actions yet, and certainly the funding isn't behind it. So and people are told they've got to wait another 3 tranches for flood defence work at their house, grant funding, and told by politicians to try and do some DIY when you're 70 and an older lady. We're not we're not going in the right direction on that. So, you know, I welcome it, but I think it's got a long way to go, unfortunately.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to? So Councillor Kershaw, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I agree with much of what Councillor Dixon has said. However, one of the things that concerns me is the lack of teeth and resource that the Environment Agency have. It's been diminished, and Natural England, you know, working with farmers to try and mitigate issues in their Bure Valley water abstraction. They are providing evidence, the EA doesn't. It's reactive. But I would mention on another as the fact that North Norfolk District Council Joint Water Resources East, there is a growing number of people in that organisation starting to think strategically, not just about coastal flooding, fluvial flooding, but about water resources generally, the shortage of water. If we keep building houses, where are we going to get it from? And this is a 50-year plus strategy, which might eventually involve desalination plants bringing water through large pipelines from other parts of the country. This is a bigger problem than North Norfolk can deal with, but I do agree that built planning policy and heritage and planning has a role to play. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kershaw. Councillor Lloyd.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I wouldn't disagree with anything that any member has come up with today in response to that, and they echo many of my own feelings. I would like to say we are one of a large number of different bodies represented on this report, and what I think we will do our utmost to influence as best we can. I do have concerns that this is just a talking shop and not that won't come up with any action. I'm sorry to be so blunt. I think it's positive that people are coming together to discuss the issue, but we really need to see some action on those areas that are most frequently affected, because this problem is only going to get worse with climate change.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Toy was next, and then I'll come over to you, Councillor Seward.
Yeah, just I agree with Councillor Dixon on you know, the planning has a big part to play in this, and just I have here a first draft for the new plan before it goes to regulation 19, so it's just an internal use copy, but there is a whole policy CC7 to deal with flood risk and surface water drainage, so it has been considered in the new plan, and we will move that forward and make sure it's part of any planning process. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope that gives you some reassurance. Work is already being done on the ground. Councillor Seward, you are next.
Yeah, I welcome this because the framework for dealing with flooding, whether it's inland or coast, is the responsibility of a wide range of organisations and companies, of which the County Council under the Flood and Water Management Act 2010 is the lead authority, but it can only work if there's partnership working. So just let's move to the practical. In the northern part of North Walsham in the area of Lingate, that estate was flooded in 2008. We're now at 2021. Some work has been done, but it's not yet completed. So you're talking 13 years. And there's a site meeting again this week to have another go. And part of the difficulty is the sheer number of different bodies that are actually involved. So at the County Council, it involves highways projects, and also the Flood and Water Management team, who are responsible not only for the overall identifying it as a priority area, but for ensuring that landowners actually keep their ditches and drains clear so that the water can pass properly. We also have the District Council that is responsible for clearing the gullies in the roads, and also for maintaining a ditch in part of the estate, which is crucial to the flow of water. But just to add to the complication, if you want a drain flushed, that is the County Council. Very difficult to explain to residents. Then you have Anglia Water. Well, I have to say, historically, like to sound good, but do very little and actually are extremely reluctant to invest. They will spend more time arguing that it's not their responsibility than it is their responsibility. Some progress is being made in North Walsham now with them, but it's tough going. We then have the internal drainage board, or the Three Rivers internal drainage board, that is responsible for ensuring that the ditches that go beyond this North Walsham settlement area are kept free of debris and water can flow. And they're responsible for getting on top of the landowners and farmers to ensure that happens. So that's another body. And then of course you've got the landowners themselves that you have to persuade that they have responsibilities for doing that. So once you've sort of gone through all of that, I think you can understand why after 13 years we've got so far, but we've still got more work to done. And why, with its residents on the Linfield estate, every time there is a heavy downpour, which tends to occur during the summer, they get worried and they still wonder why we haven't got all this work done. So yes, we have to work in partnership because of all the different bodies involved, but I do wonder if the Flood and Water Management Act is the most appropriate act now to deal with some of these issues. And really what you want is less partnership working and a body that's actually invested with the authority and the resources to direct and push things forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Flooding obviously clearly very, very important to a lot of us. Councillor Dixon, you wanted to come back.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. If I might have a second bite of the cherry, really just to, I suppose, support what Councillor Seward has said in terms of that illustrative example. And I think I'd just like to add a point to that in that, yes, that was an industrial estate. There are many, many other residential estates that we have where people are busy paving over their drives with impervious materials, and it's going on wholesale, and within a very short time, those very same people are the ones that are complaining about the roads that are being flooded because all their flood water is spilling onto the highways. So here we get this kind of sloping shoulders of all people that are involved in the process, from the individuals right up to the bigger organizations. And the only way that I know of kind of stopping that is to have a group of this kind that says, you can't shift this responsibility onto another organization that's not here today, because that's what's been happening so often in the past, because all of those bodies need to be around. And so I believe that someone like Lord Dannett is capable of saying to those parties around the table, you can't shift that onto somebody else. You've got to take your share of this. You've got to do your bit. And unfortunately, I think what they will run into is that so much of this will rest on individual property owners and landowners in terms of taking action and funding that themselves and not expecting it to be done for them or paid for it, because many of the actions that need to be taken will have been taken by their forefathers in terms of the landowners and property owners that have not done things that now need to be done. And so many chickens are going to come home to roast very shortly, and it will be painful, and there will be lots of opposition, and there'll be lots of attempts to pass the buck, and we just need to be mindful of that. Thank you.
I think we do need to be mindful of that. I do think we also need to be mindful of those residents who have taken enormous, I mean, I've been out to a couple of residents who have taken enormous steps to try and help themselves, but have not been helped by the other authorities as well. And their efforts shouldn't be forgotten. Because, yeah, some of the defences I've seen are quite incredible. Councillor Fredericks, and then I think we need to close this.
Just a quick observation that the emergency flood telephone number is nowhere to be seen on Norfolk County Council's website, and I believe there is one. So it actually just says dial 999, which is incredibly unhelpful. So I'd recommend to this group that they actually advertise the emergency telephone number. Thank you.
I'm sure we can pass that back to them. Right. This having been duly proposed and seconded, can we have a show of hands in support, please? Thank you. That's unanimous. In which case, there being no need to exclude the press and public and there being no private business, I